Okay. Again, good morning. The title of this morning's Dharma talk is I don't know, and Upadana, grasping. So I kind of left one out there, but we touch something touches us. We touch something. So there's contact, and then there's some kind of a sensation about it, a feeling, and then we take a direction. We want more of that. We want less of that, and that's the craving part, or the wishing things were different than they are, and then the grasping or the attachment is the next thing that occurs. But it seems like if we can catch it right at the contact, right when the feeling is there, before there's some kind of elaboration on not wanting it or wanting more of it or less of it, seems like bringing awareness to that takes a lot of practice. This is why the sitting down and training our mind to see clearly what is coming and going is so valuable. But it's so incredibly complicated that even though Buddhism does its darndest to point out every damn thing it can and say this happens and that happens, there's even supposed to be and I would like to meet the person who came up with this number. There's supposed to be a thought is supposed to have 17 different aspects or chitta to it. And so, and there's just all kinds of elaborations on top of that breaks that down into this and this and this. And you can spend the rest of your life counting sheep. Not that we shouldn't do some of that, of course. But the kinds of contacts just the contact itself starts to radiate in all kinds of differentiation. Differentiation and desire. There's differentiation and there's a desire for it, for less of it, for more of it, or desire for it to go away, and all the other things that show up. The differentiation, just a simple way of saying it, some things that we're making contact with are apparently stationary, like looking at a tree, or looking at a wall, or looking at some particular, like a painting or something like that. It doesn't do much. But then there's other kinds that are moving all the time. So the interplay between what is moving, the consciousness that observing the movement, and the consciousness that observes something that is relatively static, that's just one layer of complication. Then it goes in every direction from there, as I'm sure you know, or you sense that it's very difficult. So, but what happens is the self-centered mind, the ego mind, or the seventh consciousness gets magnetized by thinking there's going to be a success story here, that you can actually get what you want, that you can stop what you don't want, and that you can ignore or dismiss. And this is all bundled up in the assumption that what you're seeing is true, that it is true, that you believe your thoughts, you believe your feelings, and so on. Bringing one's awareness training to train the mind to see more clearly, more deeply, more, you can even say expansively, takes a lot of time. And most people are not interested in this, especially when they find out that this may take a lot of time, and the actual practice of meditation and some aspects of the practice of study and reading, and aspects of relating to other people who are on the path, the Sangha, and for that matter, relating to the teacher, him or herself, is difficult, can be very difficult. So it's not, it's uncomfortable to do this. It's sometimes called meditation practice is sometimes called voluntary dissatisfaction, or volunteering to sit down and not be too happy for an hour or 2 hours, and just be, you could even say, kind of bored, or perhaps irritated, or the anxiety continue to arise and become more intense. Each person is so different in this regard that it seems necessary for to have a teaching person and to have a community that's all working on the same with the same ideas and generally speaking following a very similar kind of path or teaching community. So it takes a lot of practice to actually have feelings, have thoughts, have things that are moving back and forth in the mind without doing anything with that, without affirming it, which is very simple. You can have something negative starts to happen negative in one's mind stream. Just a simple little thing of saying, there I go again, being jealous, or there I go again, being angry. That's that just adds to the spinning. So that's why the sitting practice of meditation, a strong awareness practice, will allow us over time to see more and more refined aspects of mind, which is what the Abhidharma tries to say. Here, you can do this conceptually. You can just look at all these little parts. And I'm not saying there aren't people with powerful intellects who are able to handle all of that material. There are a lot of them that do that and are able to handle it, but not all of us can do that. I happen to be one of them. So I haven't, whatever I've accomplished by just being able to sit in front of you and hold your attention for an hour or so, or whatever it may be, did not come out of intensely studying concepts. It came out of looking at what's in front of me over and over and over and continuously until I began to understand what it was. I'm not saying I even see what it is. I'm still looking at it. I look at it all the time, every morning, every night, every dream, every student. And so that being said, of course, I want you to study the Lankavatara Sutra, the Sambhina Marchana Sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and study everything you can within a certain range. You don't have to go way out somewhere where you're studying something that I can't really help you with or even comment on or answer your questions about. People teach this differently. That's why there's so many different schools. And sometimes the schools are kind of at war with each other because they think they're right, and here's these other teaching somebody else. So there's sometimes a lack of respect for the path of others, which shows up as jealousy and the desire to control, basically intense wish to be in charge of everything and be right, and to not have and to have the people who are doing things incorrectly to feel corrected and come around and follow the party line. So the contact, yes.
When you're bowing, I have a question.
Go ahead.
When you first started, you said we touch something, a feeling comes up, and then we start grasping, we want, don't want. And then you said, I think, if we can catch it at the feeling level.
Yes.
But that takes practice. So what would be catching at the feeling level?
Just don't abandon the feeling. And the way you don't abandon the feeling is when you feel it deeply. You go into I used to say, and I haven't said this in years, but when you feel something, you should feel it all the way to the center of the earth. It's just a metaphor, an image, but you should feel it. Be alive, be human. Anger, feel the anger, feel the jealousy. That's what I'm saying. Feel it. Don't necessarily get rid of or lower the temperature on the feeling by going into a craving about wanting it to go away. There I go again. Anger. No comment. Do not elaborate on anything. Be simple-minded. Unless you're studying Bill Waldron, and then be as complicated as it requires. Go in and take that thing, dismantle that, deconstruct Bill Waldron so much that he can feel it from Nepal. So I think somebody's studying my book. Oh my God. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So I'm saying whatever is occurring, that's it. Whatever's occurring, that's it. The intense feeling of anger, the intense feeling of jealousy, the intense feeling of depression. That is it. That is what is it? The seventh seventh link, the seventh, feeling. You feel it. More?
When you're bowing, so what I'm looking at is the catching the feeling. So I have this image of like a butterfly net or something, and here's this jealousy feeling.
So it's not something else. We abandon it when we think about the feeling, or when we think and then jump from the thinking about the feeling to going back into the feeling dimension, which is very similar to thoughts about the feeling that we just had. It's a way of abandoning reality. It is a way of abandoning authentic presence, because it's just too intense and too delightful, too painful, too boring, too. So, not two. It's not two. There isn't anything else. And if there isn't anything else, I'm not saying you won't continue to suffer. You won't continue to be happy. You won't continue to be sad. You won't continue to be depressed or confused or have anxiety or whatever. But that is not separate from the Buddha. It's been said way before this old man got here. Not two Buddhas, the enlightened ones, the sages down through the centuries, including the historical Buddha. Not two, not separate from sentient beings. If you see it, the work is done.
When you're bowing, not to
Cheers, I'm bowing.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Cheers on.
What registers the feeling without converting it into thought? Bowing.
Just consciousness. There's really no one there. And this is what the Abhidharma material goes into it when it starts to break everything down. And I'm fine with Abhidharma material. To Shoka, both Shoka and Kozan have been studying that pretty extensively, going deeply into that. And I'm all about studying that material. So we should do that. But it's just consciousness. This is and you can hear arguments in both directions, and probably in 15 different directions about, well, that's not far enough, or the Yogacharans are to get stuck on this or on that, and everything is empty of what the Yogacharans are stuck on, and it's just a kind of a political thing going back and forth. But it's just consciousness. We have to use a word, so that's the one I'm going to use. We could say it's just wisdom. Wisdom doesn't see anything else. It only sees this. It sees this. You could say it sees itself, but even that might be too fancy.
Yes, Marla has a question.
Marla.
She says or asks, what comes first, increasing awareness or increasing ability to feel it all the way, uncomfortable feeling?
So I don't know about the first part of it. I would say wherever you're at with that, and speaking to you specifically, Marla, you're someone that I know, and we've talked quite a few times. And I would say it's just a matter of persistence. Just persist. Go to the wall, sit down, hold still, watch. Go to the wall, sit down, hold still. Just wall gaze. Don't push on it. Don't pull on it. Don't look away. Be there as if you're never going to get up. Walk towards it as if you're never going to get there. As if. Those kind of as ifs may help you, so that because the mind becomes an instant clutter of like too many dominoes. It's just too many. And so then we tend to shut down on it. So just one thing at a time, just the wall, nothing else. If things start to show up on the wall, images, ideas, imagination, plans for the future, regrets about the past, and so on, just observe. It's just the material of mind. It's empty of what you think it is. So anytime you think something is anything, it's empty of that, including the Buddha's Dharma is empty of your opinions about it. Go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin bowing. Sokuzan, in order to feel the emotion to the center of the earth, does that require physical stillness? Bowing.
The practice part of it, the actual path quality or the ground path fruition requires to be as still as possible without aggression. So in other words, I mean from yourself, and that may take years to stop being mean to yourself. but it doesn't mean just to relax and lay back and have a cocktail. It means to sit up straight, hold still, watch the movement. So there's a relative stillness that needs to come in, but it's the middle way. It's not too tight, not too loose. Sit up, hold still, watch what moves, but stay there for some time so it has a little bit of contrast to the rest of your day, which is very busy doing this, making the bed, going to lunch, going for a walk, watching the birds, chatting with your neighbors, your relatives, your Dharma brothers and sisters, your offspring or whatever, or your cats in your case. You're having some kind of movement interaction all the time, and then we bring the whole complex, the whole sensorium, sit down, hold still, and observe the movement, and sit very, very still so that you can see what does not need to be done. You can see it, not what needs to be done. You've already done that. You're sitting down, you're holding still. Same thing when you come to book study. Those of you who have been doing this, you've heard me say over and over, you don't have to understand anything. Isn't that a good thing to hear? You don't have to understand this. I don't understand it. And you might say, well, that's kind of obvious. It's difficult to point it out directly so you'll get some kind of an aha of what I'm doing. The aha, if you ever get one, is if you needed one. I don't need one. I don't need to have any ahas. I don't have any ahas. If you see it, there isn't anything else. So there isn't anything else that's going to happen. Even your own death is not particularly an event. That's something that you've already understood, and you just realize that even though the body-mind complex is still operating, that fundamentally who you are has never really been born. This is in the text, but you still have to realize it isn't something you just believe in that. Buddhism is not particularly a system of beliefs.
Kevin Bowing, I heard
Yes.
the author Fran Lebowitz in an interview saying that emotion is not morality. And I'm thinking in terms of the protests that are going on and the demonstrations that a lot of people are trying to, quote, harness their anger or keep the anger going in order to fuel some sort of activity from that feeling place. Sure. And so if emotion is not morality, what fuels the desire for social justice if not emotion? Bowing.
So I think it's variable. I mean, there's all these different things arising, human beings arising from different directions, different understanding. So those are words. Morality is a word that points to specific things that everybody has a different idea about what it's pointing at. Same thing with emotion. Same thing with the social justice. It's what is fundamentally missing, not just at the highest levels, but in the more lower levels, is some kind of leadership or inspiration coming from people. So that's what's missing, it seems. And of course, look who you're talking to. What's missing is, even though there's all kinds of these great ideas that are relatively great, there's no fundamental understanding. And so therefore, there's very little spiritual path happening. I'm not saying there aren't maybe thousands and thousands of people that are doing this, maybe more than that, but not very many. But there's a tremendous amount of people that are totally wrapped up in their beliefs, their ideas, their opinions, even if they're not religious. They believe certain things are true and other things are not true. And this is these people, though they may think they're relatively free, they're free and well favored, they're free to come and go. Maybe they're well favored in that they are not harnessed with a whole lot of negative karma that is filling their life with suffering, paranoia, desperation, and so on. So they have that kind of situation rather than being. So there's so many variables there, and so I would say that that's going to be a long way off, because if they do it by virtue of flipping it over, it's going to come right back around. Anytime you flip anything over, it's relative. So it's just, maybe you've gotten better, but you have to die. And when you have to die, when the body mind dies, if you haven't found out what this is, then what you thought it was keeps going. What you rejected keeps happening. It's going to go the other way around. It's just like black and white, black and white, black and white. A mouse and a cat, and a mouse and a cat, and a cat and a mouse. I'm being silly, but I'm saying it has that kind of polarity to it. So that's why it's so important to transcend this. See what this is deeply before your form goes back into the earth or the fire or the water or the air. Yes.
Melissa from Portland has a question.
Yes.
What if your feelings and thoughts make you feel doubt about yourself or a situation? Is that still contact?
Yeah. So you're having contact with the doubt. And what I'm saying, as a Dharma teacher, I'm saying nothing else. Don't do anything with it. And when I say don't do anything with it, what that will bring up is a more clarity about what you can't quite do that you continue to spontaneously add because of a knee-jerk response. That's the area that needs to be seen more clearly. And so we need to see the way we have kind of a impulsive. We have started to have doubt, and we impulsively add to it. The reason we have doubt is because of the way we were treated when we were young. We were always told that we were a fool, or that we were never going to be worth anything. And that isn't necessarily just in this lifetime. It could be any level of consciousness, sometimes thought of as other lifetimes. It's just levels of consciousness. Good questions. And I apologize for not looking more into YouTube. I have a Zoom screen in front of me, so I have living beings there. And of course, the one in the YouTube is dead. Oh, wait a minute. That's just old. So, Unya's supposed to go like this every now and then, so I'll go back and look at the people that are there. Are there any people out there? Yeah, there's a few.
Melissa's out there.
Melissa's there. Yeah, Melissa's not on the Zoom screen. Yes.
How do you teach out of concepts from just looking at what this is?
Well, I started studying concepts about this particular thing in 1960. I started reading about Buddhism and concepts a long time ago. And so, some of you I've told having so much difficulty suffering and having a lot of difficulty. So I was reading at least 3 hours a day, every day, and working a full-time job, wherever that may be, over through the 60s until early 70s when I met my teacher. And then I kept reading, but then I just read what he told me to read. But before that, I was reading in every direction I could and spending a lot of time. So reflecting on this a lot and looking at it a lot and going different directions and so on. And I'm not sure if I'm getting to the question part of the response part of it, but it's like working with that a lot. So now I can't remember any of it. A little bit, but not a lot. But if you ask me about this, if it applies to your mind or how your mind works, I do have some insight into that. So therefore I respond. I don't need to look in a book. I mean, I may, if I want to give a Dharma talk, I might look and say, oh, I think I'll talk about the 5 Buddha families. And I'll probably have to go back and see, let's see, there's Vajra, Padma, Ratna. What was that one other one? Oh, Buddha. And of course, I left one of them out, karma. So, but those things are available if you're working with that and you've been doing this for decades and decades, then when you need a concept, it shows up. But the rest of the time I'm looking at it. When somebody asks me a question, they're showing me what it is. It's not magic. It's not some kind of woo-woo. I'm so wise. Wisdom or being wise is not a quality that you have any idea about until that begins to show up as you. It's like a replacement. Say, let's just take all this self-centeredness out of there and put in wisdom. But it's not that way. What it is the actual self-centeredness becomes wisdom, because it's what? Not separate. So the very person you're trying to get rid of or change or elevate to a higher level is the Buddha. No more separation, no more warfare with anything. And when that happens, then if you have anything to say about this, if someone asks you a question, you respond out of what you see. And quite often that's going to be different with each person, because 5 people might all ask a very similar question, but because of that particular person, if I'm in fact their guide or their teacher or their mentor, however you want to characterize it, then I'm going to respond in the way that I don't think about it. I just respond, but it has to do with that particular person's Buddha nature. Yes.
Sokuzan has a question from St. Louis.
Yes.
She asks, what do we do when just feeling seems to turn into passion for the feeling?
Just observe it. Do nothing with it. Nothing lasts, but it tends to persist if you fool around with it, trying to push it or adjust it or turn it into a philosophy. It tends to persist. So just that you can ask that question tells me you're looking at it. And it's just that when you actually look at it, there's the kind of advertisement that says fruition, it's on its way. There will be no advertisements. If you see advertisements, this is spiritual materialism. You're looking for something else. And what you're looking at is it. You are looking at your Buddha nature. You're looking at your mind, no matter how many scary masks it shows up with. Transcend the world by seeing what this is.
Michael Bowing.
Yes, Michael.
Are all beliefs duality?
Yeah. Well, simply put, if you as a guy, a dude, thinks something else is true, then there's you and what you think is true. So that's duality.
Is that true if I believe the sun comes up tomorrow?
The sun doesn't need your help. And sure, we could split some hairs, and but the labyrinth that is waiting us, hair's breadth deviation, just that far away, involves all kinds of philosophy and discursive thought, and even argumentation. And even you're right, and I've got this right, and you need to listen to me, or the way I understand it is this. And the elaborations are very extensive there, and they're very, very seductive, because it allows us to escape the suffering that is our immediate immediate presence that is here. To avoid that situation, we can go into some kind of discursive thought about it, talk about it, create a whole philosophy, the whole situation where we just spend a lot of time creating ideas and concepts and philosophies and psychologies and this kind of understanding, that kind of understanding.
Susan Olcott asks,
yes.
So is deep awareness a process when, as is said in Vajrayana, the 5 poisons become the 5 medicines?
Well, there's certainly something to that. It's in Buddhist Tantra, which I have studied. It's about transforming any of the negativity, of actually transforming that into wisdom. It's kind of an alchemy that showed up in early medieval times in Tibet and in ancient India. So taking that negativity, and so there's several layers of that, several ways of working with it. It's like one of them is just very simply put: feed your demons. You would think, well, why would you feed your demons? Because they're hungry. Feed them. So, in other words, be like Milarepa did as the story goes. Of course, it's a story, but said he was being plagued by his kleshas, and in the form of, and they were showing up as these little saucer beings with saucer eyes that were taunting him and tantalizing him, and he did everything. He did a lot of spells, and he did a lot of magic and everything. He tried to obliterate them or go to war with them or whatever. And then he, as the story goes, he just decided to kind of cave in and be hospitable to those. So he fed them. He said, "Here, have some tea. Have some tea." And of course, as the story goes, another metaphor, they went poof, because they were his own emotions and antagonisms and everything. And so it's just a way of talking about it. Fundamentally, things are not separate. Even those 3 poisons, 5 kleshas, or however you want to describe it. And there's also extensions on those that make it much more elaborate. But it's a tantric. Everything is coming to the same situation. If it's not two, and how all the paths going up the mountain, including the theistic approaches, I say those are more challenged because the tendency to wrap oneself in one beliefs in other tends to compromise that. But there have been a few people who seem to understand what that is.
Sokuzan, I have a question along those lines with feeding the demons. In some of our practices, we do a hungry ghost offering. Is that related to that?
Yes. Yeah, it's a little bit softer approach. It's just, we feed the consciousnesses that are have left their bodily form. It's just a way of talking about it. So don't go into that. If you come back to me and say, "Do you believe that?" Of course not. Do I disbelieve it? Of course not. But am I going to ignore it? No. This is called practicing with this. Practice right where you're at. You don't have to know if something is true or not true. That's ridiculous.
Shoka
Yes.
has a question.
Yes.
He asked, do we need to study concepts in order for them to show up in response to someone's question?
Is it Shoka?
Yes.
Well, in your case, yes. Yeah. Everybody else gets a pass, but not Shoka. So I don't know. I mean, I could say maybe a little bit, but the important thing is that you study it. And if you become a teacher, you won't be able to help it. I've often said, and I'll say again, don't teach unless you have to. I'm not saying you can't discuss the Dharma, but to function as a teaching person, not just someone who teaches meditation or something like that, just a ordinary way that shows up. That's fine, of course. But to set yourself up or allow anyone else to set you up as some kind of a guru or something like that, I don't recommend that. Well, mainly because I don't want any competition. If you see it, you won't be able to help. You won't be able to help it. You won't be able to help functioning as to help other people, which may show up as a Dharma teacher. Yes.
Yes. Katie has a question.
Katie.
How does an ally show support or even participate in social justice actions without getting drawn into the vortex of emotions that others are expressing?
Yeah. Just we have this incredible network of kind of just like this. This is amazing. A few years ago, this was not here. Here it is. Now we can all see each other. We can talk to each other without being in the same room. And same thing with all of the TV channels and all of the communication is pretty powerful. But the upside is it's good. And the downside is anybody can get in on it and broadcast any kind of propaganda, however you want to say it. And so I would say just same thing as observing the wall. Look at the wall. Look at your life. Don't do anything else you have to. This doesn't mean don't march on Washington or don't join a place where people are holding up signs. If you want to do that, I don't recommend that. But you may have to do that. Your particular wiring. Oh, look up here. But then I ignore these people.
This is Katie.
Oh, Katie's up there. Okay. Katie is not up there. Okay, let's see. So don't promote anything. Don't stop anything. And don't ignore anything. You could practice that the rest of your life. Just receive. Just look at whatever's happening and receive it if you can, without adding anything to it. And that's not something you can just do as a project. You have to actually watch the way you keep getting in the way of what's in front of you by having your ideas about what's in front of you. It's called delusion. And if you see through that completely, you're liberated. And then what will you do with your life? I have no idea. Maybe nothing. But don't do anything unless you have to. So, and you could say, and other people are going to say that people are going to be upset with you, and because they want to control you too. Even the wonderful liberal people, they want to control you. And if they start to do something, they think you should be doing it too. It's circular, and it's very difficult to be on a hobby horse on one side of the merry-go-round that's going forward and not realizing that it's going around. So be very aware of those cycles, bicycles, motorcycles. Be very aware of that so that you can see the nature of the circularity. It's everywhere. There are cycles everywhere. You go to sleep, you wake up, you eat, and you go to the bathroom. And there's cycles going on everywhere. We're full of it. There's one there. Me running my hands around in a circle. And if you see it, then you're no longer on that circle, nor are you away from it. This doesn't mean that if you're sitting here and you're watching television and somebody's controlling people or killing people like they've been doing, that you don't get enraged or just upset about the way people are treating each other. But still, if we go into praise and blame too much, then we get sucked right into that. You lose your wisdom. Your wisdom gets covered up by the cloudiness and the hope and fear of wanting things to be different than they are. Right back to contact, feeling, which I'm not saying ignore the feeling. I'm not even saying ignore the grasping or the craving. That feeling and craving is a subtle area there, and people teach that in different ways. I think you should go ahead and crave all you want. Just don't hook up your claws. Just don't grasp. Don't clamp down. And if you're already clamping down on it, then look at the clamp. Look at the way you're clamped down without going to war with that. Go in the other direction is trying to stop doing that. It's freedom from extremes. But first you have to see the extreme of what you're doing with your mind, or see the extreme of what you're doing with your mind. This is ignorance. This is passion. And depending on how much force you're doing this, how much force, that's the aggression. And then there's all the other jealousy and avarice and greed and so on that are mixed in with that. So just observe. Do less, but see as much as you can without covering it up with your conclusions, covering it up with your exclusions. We'll cover it up. It's difficult to do that. It's voluntary dissatisfaction or suffering. So you have to look at that so you can see for yourself and each person. You have to see the way you personally cling. And as I think I said initially, if you feel it's not wrong to go and get a sign that says anything, whatever you want to say, Black Lives Matter or anything, of course we should do that. But you should watch your intention and your motivation about that, and see if you're doing it to please someone else, and see if you're doing it because you absolutely have to do it. If you have to do it, go for it. And be careful, of course. I mean, you get all the other kinds of warnings and considerations. That would be a dangerous area to be in. And I'm not saying that's what you're even asking about. I'm just using that myself as a way of, we feel drawn into that. But it's a pretty powerful whirlwind there. And there's some people that are going to be doing that. And you personally, anyone who's listening to me the very best thing you can do is train your mind. So if you do get up off your cushion and go running down the street into the world, so to speak, if you do that, at least you're not taking a lot of your own hidden, trapped aggression and meeting other aggression out there and then suddenly spewing that on it. You can see it out there. You can see people are out there with good intentions, and then they get triggered, and then they become kind of like what the powers that be, the military, police force leaders, that they turn into that, because that's what happens in warfare. If you go to war with war, then you're going to become a warrior. You're going to fight. The word warrior is used in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's used as a hero. I don't usually use the word warrior because, well, I have several very personal reasons why I don't. Yes.
Melissa has another question.
Melissa.
She says, how is craving and grasping different?
Yeah. So the craving part, the way it's broken up in the 12 links, the craving part is you want something else. You have a feeling and you want it to go away. Craving. You have a feeling and you want more of it. Craving. You have a feeling and you'd like it to speak. You want to dismiss it somehow. And so, those you haven't done anything yet. You're just having the emotion of not wanting that, or maybe wanting more of that, wanting to hang on to that. And then the next one that comes up is the grasping or the clinging. And that's where you've actually taken something that was actually still floating around as an experience for you, and you've locked down on it. And quite often, you could say it this way, that the desire for that, when you start to hang on to it, starts to morph into something else. Nothing lasts. Even in the Abhidharma material, it says that anything that shows up, even a thought has 17, there's words for that, chittas. I'm not sure what, you could use just about any word. You could use mouse ears, and that would work. It's just different words about the same thing. And so, in order to see how you could release something or not grasp, first you have to witness the grasping. And if you're trying to stop grasping before you've even seen the very way in which you cling or grasp, you're trying to stop ahead of time. So you can be the person, ego, who doesn't grasp. So it's a very subtle area. It's you can even say that perhaps you should just watch the grasping rather than try to prematurely be a better, higher person who doesn't grasp, because that feeds right into the seventh consciousness, or the self that thinks there is somebody that's succeeding. There's no success. Further questions? Shut up.
You often teach it's always about awareness.
Yes.
Is there an intention with contact, feeling, and grasping to work back from the grasping?
So I think this is kind of what I'm saying. Like when I did this, I left out somewhat. I mean, the grasping and the craving are very, very stitched. So it's difficult. They differentiate between those, but they're very close. So I think there is a working back there. And even traditionally, they talk about the Buddha actually saw sickness, aging, and death. That was the end. And then he went backwards and saw birth, and then saw becoming. Then you saw attachment, then craving, then feeling, then contact, and then the first five, which are sixth sense, feels, name, and form, consciousness, and avidya, or marigpa, or ignorance. So he went backwards, but they're just concepts. So it's not saying that he had these concepts and was going back, just that's how he traced it. Apparently, we don't know. We don't really have any written work of the Buddha. We don't even have any written work of anybody who knew him. All we have is things that were written hundreds of years later by people who apparently had good memories, but we don't know.
Shadow bowing. If there's some kind of relative progression back through those? How can we keep that teaching of always about awareness in mind?
We just be aware of those. Awareness is going to, in order for something to, for us to see the spaciousness of awareness, there's going to be some kind of form arising in it. It's even sometimes said that you can be aware of awareness, and sometimes some teachers use that. Be aware of your awareness. That may show up for you, but it's not. It has no status as something. So it could show up differently for different people. I think those are good concepts. I think the one to look at closely is when there's contact and then there's feeling. There's contact with something. There's some kind of contact, and then there's a feeling about it, and then there's a craving, and then attachment. Not wrong. It's not doing. It's something to be aware of. So then, as long as you're a living being, anything that needs to be done relative to your life or to anyone else comes out of a wide understanding that is not denying causes and conditions, or is not denying pratitya samutpada or dependent origination. It's not doing away with that. It's actually part of that as long as there's a living form happening. But who you are is not separate from this form, and is also not the same as this form. This teaching shows up everywhere. Sandokai, the equality of sameness and difference. It's just a way of pointing at it. Two arrows meeting in midair.
If
Yes.
I start to see feelings or craving come up, it feels like there's a lot of effort or energy going into not doing something with that. If someone were to see fully or completely the feeling itself, would there be effort in not doing anything with that feeling?
Probably not. Anytime there's any efforting going on relative to how one feels, then there's some kind of craving attachment situation happening. So, but to just have the feeling, there may be something attendant to that. Excuse me. There may be something else happening along with that's possible, but probably not much. Just less is better. Feeling may show up, and you may just look at it, or observe it, or receive it. Whatever word works for you.
In that, if it's a struggle for us not to go to the grasping, should we continue to grasp?
That's where it becomes very personal. I think it's a good question. I think it's very personal. You could look at that and watch the way you grasp. You could see the way you hang on, even though when you do that, some aspect of the consciousness starts to flip around. But you could watch the way that happens. I sometimes use literal. So, if you have a hold of something, you're fixated on something, you can't really just let go of it, because you're ignoring the way in which you're fastened on. So to continue to use this particular, you need to watch and see the area, the way in which the clinging is occurring. And then if you see the way the clinging is occurring, because just of the nature of consciousness and the nature of the fundamental truth that nothing is separate, that clinging comes apart. No guarantee. So it's not a conclusion. It'll come apart in such a way that you won't care whether it comes apart or not, because you see the truth. And this is what this old man is encouraging you to do. You need the teacher so you can leave the teacher. This doesn't mean you'll move to Vermont, but you have to see what it is. It has to be seen. Each person has to see it. Not think it, not feel it. See it. Have to see, smell, taste, hear, touch, think. Everything has to be understood deeply as not separate. Yes.
Katie has another question.
Katie?
She says, as an Army vet who already feels existential angst about my service, I frequently experience people thanking me for my service in a putting me on a pedestal way. How do I respond in a way that honors my own pain and is also respectful to others?
Well, less is better. People sometimes say that to me. They find out I was in the Marine Corps. Well, thank you for your service. I usually say, you're welcome. Less is better. And you don't have to say it sarcastically or just say, you're welcome, or some kind of response to be polite to them, because they're working in terms of their own confusion about the military or about service to the country. Sometimes people hear that being said to others and they just copy it. They're not really even sure what they're even saying. They just know that seems to be a polite thing to say to somebody who's just spent years in the military. Thank you for your service. It's not that the intentions aren't good intentions, but quite often that's just ignoring the basic situation. But we should be polite to anyone who says that.
David has.
Go ahead, Sokuzan.
You use the word contact, meet, and I wonder, are there two things that meet? Bowing.
Yeah, there is the aspect of consciousness and the nominal world that is in flux. So there are things that come together and separate and come together and separate. But fundamentally, nothing is happening because it's not separate. It's fundamentally not separate. But the illusion of the separation causes things to come together and separate and come together and separate. So just observe that. More about that, Sokuzan?
Sokuzan bowing. Two arrows meeting in midair. Is that an ultimate truth? Bowing.
It's a relative description of ultimacy. So it's a relative way. Two arrows take something that's relative, and various teachers. Dogen does this all the time. He gives you something and takes it away. The Diamond Sutra, read that 20 times. Read it 100 times. Read it slowly, and then read it really fast. And then read it slowly, and then read it backwards. I'm not kidding. I mean, you could actually go back and forth. Some of these teachings, the Diamond Sutra is a powerful way of helping us to look at the illusion of duality. It gives it to you and takes it away. Gives it to you and takes it away. Yes.
Follow up to Katie's question. She has another one. How do I respond when people push for more than just what you were saying earlier?
Push for what I was saying earlier?
Yeah, you're welcome. When they push for more than that.
Well, it would depend on situational, so it would depend on how the pushing is showing up. If they're threatening you, you better thank me for my comment, or are you upset with the military, or if they go after you some way, then less is better. You can communicate a lot just with body language. Don't forget that you are not just a thought process lodged inside of a cage. I mean, how would they ask it? I'm not sure. There's so many different ways that they could say, so what was that like for you? Do you regret going in the military? Do you regret getting out? Don't you wish you were still in there so you could fight the good fight or something like that? Hear them out. And then you could respond sincerely at the end of it. You could say, not particularly. I have Marines come and find out I was a Marine and say, hey, Semper Fi. I say Semper Fi back. I don't have any point to make with those people who are saying that. I'm not going to separate myself from them and to be some special person who no longer likes the military. I actually don't dislike the military, nor do I like it. I don't do anything with it. It's a confusing situation that is highly stylized and polished and formed so that we can control people It's about control. Liberate yourself from the control, from the dictator that's in your seventh consciousness that thinks you are somebody, and that you deserve this, or you deserve that, or this should happen, or that should happen. Yes.
David W. asks, can we see what conditions feeling?
You can go back in that area and see what the causes and conditions that are going to bring that up. But I don't know if tracing it back too far. It seems to be necessary as practitioners. You can do that conceptually, but it seems to be necessary to just find the leading edge of the feeling, because everything you need to know is right in that. Everything you need to know is in that. So I'm saying that the texture of the feeling, if you go into that, the whole ego does not like this, because it's realizing it's going into a dark forest with no reference points. Too many trees, too many eyes peeking out of the bushes, too many growling noises. Let's just get back out in the open and think about this. Let's go back to the picnic table out in the clearing, sit down with a legal pad, and let's just make a plan. I have a plan for you. Train your mind. And how does that show up? Sit down, hold still, and see how untrained your mind is. If you sit for any length of time, years, I would recommend, you will eventually see what this situation is. And it might be, the path leading to that might be full of lots of sinkholes and brambles, rocks and shoals, however, whatever metaphor you want to use, is going to be filled with difficulty. Do it anyway. I'll help you. As long as I'm here, I'll help you.
I don't see any more questions here.
Okay.
Are there any more from?
Let's go ahead, Maria.
Is the believing a part of the seventh consciousness?
Yeah. Believing something's true. We no longer see what's out there, which is doing whatever it's doing, but we tighten it up by believing it. So we believe that. So that no longer can be anything other than what we believe. So we relate to our belief. So we've solidified the whole thing into what we believe, what we don't believe, and that kind of thing. So what do we do about that? Train the mind to see clearly the way that seventh consciousness grasps some things and rejects other things. See the way that belief is like some kind of a patina over the covering of something that we can't tell exactly what it is anymore.
Maria Bowing. So if the belief, I believe, is a demon, and you suggest to feed the demon, how can we stop believing if we keep feeding the demon?
It's much easier to believe it, to feed a demon you don't believe in. The ones you believe in, that's real scary. I mean, then you're worried about serving it the wrong brand of tea. So you begin to see it. I think that was probably what was happening with Milarepa, is you're beginning to see that these are projections, of his mind, and rather than actually feeding them tea, he decided to make friends with himself. So he could see his negativity. You can see your negativity. You can see your raw, rugged emotions coming up over this or that with all kinds of content that support and bolster that. And you begin to see that it's unreal. It's just unreal. It's not that it's not painful. Of course it is. It can be terribly painful. But you see that it's unreal. So you no longer go to war with yourself. The feeling is, and this metaphor, this description only works so far, but it's like you don't give a damn if it ever goes away. It's welcome. Have a seat. Make yourself at home. Demon, make yourself at home. That which is not agreed with, that which is not opposed, and that which is not ignored is liberation. But you have to do it. It has to be thorough. And it's so thorough that it's like nothing. That's how thorough it is. Because if something occurred, then something else is going to occur. And then something else will occur. I'll take one more question if there is one.
Annamaria bowing.
Yes, Annamaria.
So I've been watching a lot of what appears to be this bullying and into these forced confessions like of white privilege. A lot of people bullying people into confessing that and what that all means.
Yeah.
Can that kind of antagonistic push to someone lead to an actual genuine reflection and examination of their white privilege?
Well, yeah, but but it's just temporary. It's on the surface. It's just stuff on the surface. There's been no. I mean, I'm very biased when it comes to this. I don't care how great a person's philosophy, how wonderful they are, or how magnanimous, or how whatever. Without mind training, it's circular. It's circular, and it will go down and under, and it will surface back up. You cannot squeeze happiness out of samsara. We have to start somewhere. So where are we starting? Let's start with our own minds, rather than our ideas, our concepts, our judgments, and our the whole white-black situation. I'm not saying it's not horrible. It's also horrible of what Stalin did in the 30s to his people, starving them. It's also the woman who wrote Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States. What was her name? Ortiz? I can't remember her name right now, but it's hard to read that or listen to that if you have, because it's one terrible, horrible thing that we did to the indigenous people after another, and she documents all of it, what happened, when, what. It's like, yeah. So it's so incredibly powerful that the only way it can be done, my understanding, and I'm biased here, is to each individual is going to have to train their mind. That may take a long time. The whole country situation, even though you have somebody relatively a nice person, relatively a kind person, relatively a uplifted, sane president, still, that president still kills people. Still sends drones, and still, I mean, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation, because it's dependent origination. This causes that, and if you're listening to this, not because I'm such a sweetheart, but because you're interested in finding out who you are fundamentally, because of the teachings of the Buddha that go back thousands of years, there's a good possibility, if you dedicate yourself to it, that you will discover who you fundamentally are, which in its ultimate sense has nothing to do with Buddhism. Buddhism is just the name of a boat. It's not the water. So if you see that, then you can actually teach Buddhism, because you don't particularly believe in anything. So I would say, Annamaria, what you're talking about there is just support the people in doing whatever they're doing. Be kind to everyone, be kind to them, rather than take issue. You can see that it's circular. You can see that the person that's accusing this person, the person's feeling guilty or feeling it's like there's no praise, no blame, yet there's a load of responsibility. There's no praise, there's no blame. That's a misunderstanding. But the responsibility was in the ability to respond. This means that everyone needs to respond to whatever's happening or in front of them all the time. And you can't do that if you can't do it completely and thoroughly and in a sane way if you have ideas about who's in front of you. Even if the ideas are true, even if they relatively did do this or this or this, if you buy into the causes and conditions, then you're trapped by the very causes and conditions that you are using to blame someone. So you can't do it, because that means you would believe in cause and effect, that people are to blame. No, everyone's responsible. There isn't anything, any direction you can look that you can't see the back of your hand everywhere.
Annamaria bowing. Can you be clear about what you're seeing and also be angry?
That's the only way you can do it. It's the only way you can do it. Nothing's left out. You don't have to get rid of anger. I'm pissed off most of the time. Not at you guys. I mean, what I'm saying, of course, I'm not pissed off most of the time. I'm saying You get to have your freedom. If there's no one having the feelings, if there's no solid being anywhere, then the feelings from the 13th century are welcome. Come on in. Tear the place up. I'm talking about your consciousness. I am talking about liberation from extremes, from accepting, rejecting, or ignoring. You're liberated from it. It's like nothing is threatening anymore. And yet everything is completely visible and transparent. So you can see everybody's trip all the time. And yet because you see it so clearly, you realize that they have to do it. Their sovereign spirit, identity, their Buddha nature, they have to do it themselves. And the ones that don't do that, not that I'm singling anyone out, ones that don't do that are going back into the dark. And the ones that see that go into the light. And this is not eternalism and nihilism. It's just the way it looks. So,
what of that? The impulse, because I've had this where I see a situation and it just feels like they're reversing what they're accusing the other person of doing. It's happening all the time.
Yeah.
Especially now.
I call that awareness. That's awareness. I call that awareness. Go ahead with your question about it.
So my impulse in that moment, and I've refrained, is to point out how that's not helpful, how that is just doing what you're accusing the other of doing.
But even what you're saying, you to point that out is also not helpful. That would be like me taking all of my students and one at a time sit down and tell them exactly what I can see that their problem is. It'd be very, very disrespectful to people to accuse someone of being white, or excuse someone of being having two elbows. I mean, I'm being silly about it, but I'm saying don't do anything unless you have to. And if someone has not given you permission to teach them, zip it up. There are plenty of people out there that are running their mouths and running their story and everything, and some of them are highly accurate relatively. They're pointing out things. So I can name 10 or 15 people that are on, maybe not that many, but several that are on the news programs and so on. They're really clear. They're really, especially a lot of Black people are really clear about what this is. We're kind of finally listening to some of these people who have been talking for years and writing books and so on. But that doesn't mean that they have the clue to liberation. They're still wound up in the causes and conditions, but their view is different because they've been at the big end of the stick. So they're going to be more clear about maybe a bigger picture. But you can't solve the bigger picture by just acting different or just being different or making different laws. Or not that some of that wouldn't help. As I said before, I'm very biased. I think the only direction to go for each person is to train your mind to see clearly, so you don't bring unexamined aggression out into the world and make it even more difficult. So like what you're saying there, I'm not saying you have unexamined aggression, but probably. And to do anything with that, if you could make it very, very clear, maybe you might not be adding any aggression to it, but you may trigger the aggression that's in that person, where they in a different way, they might be able to see it. But when you trigger other people's aggression, you're meddling with them. You're not respecting their Buddha nature. You're going into their Buddha nature and pointing out things about them that are wrong, and they're not ready to see that yet. Even people who come to me and said, "Go ahead."
Is this a question of skillful means in that situation?
That's the fancy word for don't do nothing. Don't do nothing.
Well, I'm thinking in particular of this African American who I'm sure you've seen the video, that he pulled a youngster, the next generation, from the crowd and said, you better come up with something, because what this generation has done and what my generation has done is not working.
Yeah.
And I felt like it quelled the aggressive older generation. Like everyone just got a little quiet and maybe open for a second to seeing something a little differently.
Yeah.
So that's a situation that it just lingered as a moment of like where there was an opening.
How old was the child?
He was 16, and the older generation, the guy must have been like 65, 70, and then the young guy was maybe 40-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
well, it's relatively.
So just him saying what we're doing is not working. What the old generation and what my generation, it's not working. It's up to you to find something different. Find a different way.
Mm-hmm. It's still a cultural, political context, which everything is happening as if everybody's real, if everybody is solid and ongoing, and so on, as if there's solid beings who are right and solid beings who are wrong. It's not saying that relative truth isn't there and supports it. That's what's called evidence. You know, that all evidence is partial, that it only sees part of the situation. So that's all I'm saying about it. And, you know, the relatively speaking, what the person is saying to the young person based on relative truth and causes and conditions, there's something to that. But ultimately, without mind training, it's just going to continue to go in circles. It has been for, go ahead, please, go ahead.
In the same way that you mentioned earlier that it's just temporary,
yeah.
My watching that video and the quelling, if those people that haven't been working with their mind are quelled, it's just momentarily, possibly.
Yeah, that would be the way it looks. I don't know how it is. How it is not separate. But how it looks relatively is turns this and it turns that way and it turns this way and it turns that way, just because of the foot. Just like why is it all of a sudden we have 3 or 4 or 5 oligarchs who are extremely popular? What's that about? So it's called dependent origination. It's not just that a bunch of people are right and a bunch of people are wrong. Regardless of what we think about it, things are not separate. So difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can dedicate the merit.
We can dedicate. Okay, dedicate the merit in
the temple.
In the temple, yeah, in the Zendo. Very good.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji Ho San Shi Shi Hu Shi Son Gu Sa Mo Ko Sa Mo Ko the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Prenez-vous, mes amis. How did I do, Mayun? Okay.
Roxanne, done.